And one of the things about doing my job is it's really important to find an organization and a leader where you can align with, the values and the culture of what's going on. People need to know what is and isn't okay. And really that comes from the top. People boss watch, they understand what's acceptable, and they'll understand what's acceptable by what they see going on around them, not what you tell them is acceptable as well. And it's such an important part of an organization. And it comes back to this, why do you need to be in and around your colleagues? It's to feel that and understand it. And, the job of the board and the leadership team is to make sure that the culture aligns to what it is that the organization needs to achieve and its purpose, because shifting culture is really tricky. It's really tricky.
On today's episode of Careers Unwrapped, we're excited to have Danny Harmer, who's the esteemed Chief People Officer at Aviva. Now, Danny, I know, is a recognized leader in human resources and business, known for her, I think, innovative approach to developing people and cultivating inclusive working cultures. So as a trailblazer in HR, Danny's also been instrumental in transforming HR practices to better meet the challenges of today's dynamic business environments in her own career that's flowed through financial institutions such as Halifax, Barclays, Metro Bank and more, and now at Aviva. So today she's hopefully going to share her insights into building a successful career in HR and people, the evolution of that field and the changes in the sector right now as well, and also how career starters can navigate their own path in this growing industry. So Danny, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Very excited to be here.
I'm going to throw one tough question at you first of all. COVID changed a lot about how we work. And what do you think is the single biggest change in working practices you've seen since the pandemic?
I think post-COVID, the biggest practice for financial services certainly is that in order, financial services wasn't impacted in the way perhaps retailers or hospitality were, in that we could continue to work as long as we could get everybody home and get them, a laptop to connect to the organization, to our customers, which did actually take some doing. But what it does now mean is that we offer flexible hybrid working, so a mix between office and home working for roles where you don't need to physically be in an office like a receptionist for pretty much all of our people. And that's just something that 5 years ago, we'd done a couple of pilots at Aviva. It was before I was there, but people went, too hard, not sure if we can do it. And, necessity is the mother of invention.
You think that's going to stay looking forward another 5 years now, or is a bit of natural momentum, but also business pressure going to start to bring people a little bit back into the office?
We ask our people to be, for office-based roles, we ask our people to be in the office around 50-50, and some people want to be in the office more than that, that's fine. But I think there are sort of two tensions going on. Whilst people enjoy the flexibility and the lack of commuting and I've got a parcel coming today, or the plumber's coming to, fix my boiler or whatever, which we understand that flexibility is really helpful. We also know that being together in the office really matters. And actually, I'd say it really matters early on in your career, in a new organization, in a new job, if you're trying to build a new network, if you're trying to learn. And when we look at the correlation between performance, progression, engagement, people who are not in the office very much at all tend to not perform as well. And I'm not talking about productivity. I'm just talking about that sort of feeling connected to the organization, engaged in it, perhaps don't understand how what they do impacts on the team, the customers, and the wider business. And organizations are successful where you have lots of people, but they kind of know how what they do moves the business forwards. And I think you can really miss out on that if you're at home. So businesses need to manage the desire that the workforce has for flexibility, which of course is not available if you're in hospitality or retail either. We have to remember that, with helping everybody and the business to be high performing. And I think it's a delicate balance. And I think the key role that leaders play in that is really important.
Yeah, I think I find for myself as well that hindsight's wonderful, but you can start to appreciate how much of what you learned about the job you do, you learn from just being around the people. And I don't just mean the processes of doing it, but the sort of ways and styles of working. And you need that in most jobs where you're working in teams with other people at some point as you're starting out, because otherwise you don't get the full experience. But it's a tension at the moment, especially with the sort of career starters who are saying from day one, I need a lot of flexibility, and businesses saying, we want to give you that flexibility, but we actually know how much more you will benefit if you're with your team and your co-workers more often.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And, those young people who, had to be homeschooled during lockdown, if we're all really honest with ourselves, they experienced that. Mechanically, were they getting some of the learning and the education that they would have done had they been together in school? Yes. But was it an experience like school? No. And it's exactly the same, right?
So HR then as a sector, why was that the right place for you? What are your first steps from your education into actually I'm going to go work in HR and go work with people? And what was it called then?
Yeah. So before I was in HR, certainly when I was first working, it was called personnel. And it was it made sure you got paid and it made sure you got a contract. And really it was administration related to the employment of people is probably how I describe it. And then, as organizations realized that you need to move people forwards, training would have sat in there, learning, that kind of thing. And the early stages of starting to think about employee engagement and benefit. I was very lucky. I went to university. I worked in financial services, first in sort of trade finance, which does what it says on the tin, a company that helps finance trade deals, and then moved into what was then the Halifax. So it's still a brand that's on the high street today. People would think of it as a bank, basically. At the time, it was a building society. And I joined them in their operations development program, which was about training future branch managers, area managers, operations managers, and did a number of roles there and became an area manager. So I was looking after a number of branches in a location. And my boss at the time, who was a regional director, who I'm eternally indebted to, said to me, what do you want to do with your career? And I said, I'm quite interested in what was by then called HR, human resources. And he said, why? And I said, well, look, the way I run my area is that I say to our people, right, we need to give customers the best service and the best advice, right? That's the foundation. That's the strategy of what it is we do from our branches. And the way that we do that as a team is we make sure that the person who is the best at savings is in the branch that has, the best opportunity to do savings. And the person that's best at loans is in the branch where we're most likely to have customers who want to borrow for their financial requirements. We make sure that we always know who our next branch manager is, who our next assistant branch manager is. I'm heavily involved in recruitment because what I understand is that it's the people that make an organization successful. Because ultimately, whatever you boil it down to, whether you're looking at great products or great technology, those great products and that great technology is designed by your people, is sold by your people, is advised on by your people. And I think that the way that I ran my area was all about, I understand how people enable success in a business. And this is why I love him. I was 8 months pregnant with my son, our middle child. And Max, my regional director, phoned me and said, I need to come and see you. I need to talk to you about something. Okay, fine. He came to see me at home and said, just to let you know, we're going to be changing the footprint of some of the regions, which means we need another region, which means we need another regional head of human resources. And I'd like you to do the job. Now, people may not believe this. It's quite unusual for someone to offer you a job when you're 8 months pregnant, because there is a small inconvenience of you disappearing for a while. So, I mean, this was over 20 years ago. So very, fabulous of him to do it. I went, I had my baby, I came back to work, and then I partnered him as his head of human resources. And since then, I've seen my job as how do you make the business brilliant through its people? And in order to do that, you have to understand what it is the business needs to achieve commercially, what the sort of performance levers are in the business. And then your job is to support everybody in the organization, including the leaders, to just get everyone lined up, like, sort of iron filings being pulled together by a magnet, whatever the purpose, the mission is of that organization, to help make it fabulous. And it's a career I love. I feel very privileged.
The career you love, the industry overall, HR, has grown by over 40% in the last decade in terms of the number of people working in it. compared to 10% for the general workforce as a whole. So overall, it's accelerating. More businesses are employing more people with different job titles, but broadly under this people and HR umbrella. Why has there been such growth in this sector?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is probably about roles that might not have been seen as HR and a specialism before being recognized as such. So things like training, leadership development, actually sitting in the organization in the HR function. I think also, we understand now that how we operate, being efficient. So having people operations, doing advice, making sure that managers understand what the policies are and can self-serve. I think it's a much more sophisticated function than it was. Interestingly, I mean, in the businesses I've worked in, we keep HR, I would say, pretty lean, and I think certainly done well, it shouldn't need massive numbers of people, but you do need to understand what are the things that are going to really impact on the business and the people in it.
In that type of role, it always strikes me that there's a need for balance and getting the balance right. I mean, first of all, you're employed by the business to be part of driving business performance. But also you are, or one is and is seen also as being often the person on the side of the staff or providing fairness for the employers. And so you're not their union, but you exist in this role that sometimes sits between management and staff, but has business interests at heart. How have you developed yourself to really be able to do that well?
Whether I do it well, we'd have to ask some of my colleagues. I think the thing is, so I'm very clear that the employment relationship is exactly that, right? It all starts with a contract. We are all in Aviva, which is where I currently work. We're all there because we're employed by Aviva to do something, and we receive a salary in exchange for work and skills and experience and time. And I think you just have to remember that whatever else is going on in the business, that is at the heart of what we're talking about, which probably sounds quite sort of cold and businesslike, but it is a business relationship. I think then, the role of human resources is to remember that reputationally, you want the organization to be able to attract the very best talent and to protect its brand. And if people aren't treated in the right way, you can't do those things. So again, obviously just doing the right thing is really, really important to most humans and to me. But remember that there's a sort of commerciality to it as well, because unless you do, I think it could be hard to influence leaders in the business to understand why, some of the things that we talk about are important. And then using data, because in my experience, if you use data, which can be trickier in the people space, but there's enough of it around now. And as a profession, we're getting much better at data and analytics. If you use data and, present people with facts, it takes a lot of the heat out of these sort of, conversations. So for example, if you're talking to a leader and saying, look, I think we need to talk about this area of your business, because if we look at engagement, it's not probably in line with, some of the other areas. If you look at turnover, it seems to be higher than in some other areas. If you look at absence, it's higher than in some other areas. If you can't attract people, keep them until they're skilled, get them to come to work and perform at their best, you're going to struggle to be a successful business. So, how do we help you with that? Now, I think the wrong way to approach that would be, I'm not sure your people are very happy, which I suspect is, maybe what people think it is that HR is about.
In this particular scenario, if they're leaving early and it's harder to recruit them, there are fundamental problems inside a team or a department or a business.
Yeah, there are likely to be. We're all humans, right? And we're all different. And sometimes all of us will go into wrong organizations, wrong teams, wrong jobs. It won't be the right time in our life, and that is, I think it's really important, especially if you're early on in your career and thinking about your career, to remember it's not the end of the world. It's going to be fine. It's going to be absolutely fine. But generally, if you look at a whole team and go, systemically, there's an issue here, it's probably not the people in the team. It's probably the leader.
So if I'm much younger and thinking about HR as a career. I'm wondering about it for myself. What are the questions I should perhaps be asking myself to make a judgment about whether I think I would be good working in people and HR?
So the first one, lots of people say this to me when they, if they want to talk to me about a career in HR, and they go, I think I should be in HR because I like people. And I'm just going to take you back to the conversation we just had about, right, it starts with an employment contract. It is a business relationship first and foremost. Actually, if you really like people and love building relationships, I'd suggest that business development or sales might be a better, match to your skill set. But what you do need to be is curious. Really curious about how people and what they do feeds through to the performance of an organization. I think you have to be quite brave and be prepared to tell people things that they might not always want to hear. So you have to be very good at using data in a sort of an informative way and being able to show people that you have their best interests at heart, even when perhaps it might not always feel like it. For example, you've got really high attrition, we've got a problem, we need to help you with it. And yeah, I think those are probably some of the key qualities. But you've got to be commercial, you've got to understand how a business works. Because if you don't understand the business, I don't think my profession is a soft profession. If you don't understand how the business works and then build the expertise of what are the different kind of tools that I have in my kit bag as an HR professional, or the things I can equip leaders and colleagues to do, you're not going to have an impact on the business. And that should be your purpose.
And often you'll see HR, there are obviously lots of descriptions of HR roles out there in terms of titles. And you'll often see people and culture joined together. But I wonder how much you think it is the function of HR to set the culture, as opposed to is the culture set from the top of the business down, or is the culture actually set by 2,000 people who work there, just setting it by the way that they act together? So what creates a culture, and how can someone in one role influence that?
Culture is one of these things that, as a profession, we're getting much better at getting data around it. But you can't hold it, right? You can see it all around you in an organization. You can touch it, you can feel it. People will be able to say to you when you work in a business and, when you work there, well, that's not how we do things around here. When people say that to you, they're going, oh, you're bashing into, our culture in some way, when you see that happen in an organization. So culture is made up of everything and everybody in the organization. Simply, it's just, how we do things around here. And the cultural tone, what is and isn't acceptable, I think should be set from the top. So I think it should be the executive team, the board, the chief executive. And one of the things about doing my job is it's really important to find an organization and a leader where you can align with, the values and the culture of what's going on. People need to know what is and isn't okay. And really that comes from the top. People boss watch, they understand what's acceptable, and they'll understand what's acceptable by what they see going on around them, not what you tell them is acceptable as well. And it's such an important part of an organization. And it comes back to this, why do you need to be in and around your colleagues? It's to feel that and understand it. And, the job of the board and the leadership team is to make sure that the culture aligns to what it is that the organization needs to achieve and its purpose, because shifting culture is really tricky. It's really tricky.
And the way you describe there as leader-led, I think is so important. I'm always interested in both the difference, but also the crossover between management and leadership, and how some people are in a management position because they may have years of experience or they may have a certain knowledge base. They are therefore also leading, even if they think that they're not a leader. And other people who are not actually in a position of designated responsibility, they lead their peers, or they lead through the business, through the way that they act. And culture is, you say, is so set by leadership. It's not necessarily set just by people who happen to be in management positions. But you notice it when it goes wrong quicker than
yeah.
when it's there. In your line of work, obviously, there's there's highs, there's lows, there's everything in there. And you said at the beginning when you start out, it's quite administrative, personnel, we're hiring you, the contract, there are rules to follow and things like that. But sometimes the work of people in HR has to deal with the pretty gritty issues. So we're talking about people having to be fired, large scale redundancies sometimes, which whole companies or sectors. When do you think you've really faced up to the really gritty, not fun end of the role?
Yeah, I mean, do you know whether organizationally you have to exit one person because of poor behaviors or a performance issue, or it's a large scale change program that means there are some jobs that just won't exist in the company anymore? I still find it very humbling. And the experience of doing it, I probably am better at it, both one-to-one and also just because of experience thinking through where there is a change program and it might impact on jobs, what the playthrough is for that, how we can do it in the best possible way, how we can give people reassurance and try and find other jobs for them. Actually, I'm a great believer that organizations, we have the people we've been waiting for, we just need to give them the right skills, as long as their behaviors and their intent is good. It's never very fun, but when I talk to people in my team about it, maybe if they're a little earlier in their HR career and they're doing things like this for the first time, the important thing to remember is it's much worse for whoever the person is who's impacted. That's really important. The second thing is whether it's one person or it's a large scale program, which I have to say we try and avoid at Aviva. These you can end up with sort of lists of people, and we use things like Excel spreadsheets, and I'm like, as soon as you think that is a spreadsheet rather than a human being and names of human beings, you just shouldn't be doing this job anymore, because we have an enormous impact potentially on people's lives, and it's a tremendous responsibility, which I think you have to take seriously, but also remember that your first responsibility is to the organization and whatever it is that the commercial outcome needs to be. So if it's someone whose behaviors aren't in line with the organization or they've been dishonest, then yes, they need to go, but you can still treat them with respect. If we are closing down, it's hypothetical because we hopefully, touch wood, don't do this sort of thing at Aviva, but if we were closing down a business, or stopping a particular line of business in an organization, then of course you don't need those jobs anymore. But in a business with some scale, usually you can do something about making sure that those people you can find alternatives for.
One of the things we hear a lot of from career starters, those people who are maybe looking for their first job or in their first or second and looking for a career change, is what on one side of the coin might be called the increasing professionalism of the recruitment process. Everything from blind recruiting through to the use of AI and other technologies as well. But from the side of the person looking for a role, we get a lot of feedback about how it's increasingly impersonalized. They're not meeting real people. They're often never meeting a real person and being given a decision also not by a real person. And so how do you get the balance right there between technology and data and fairness in recruiting and actually still making it a human experience for people who are at very tricky, nervous stage in their career development?
Yeah, I understand for anyone who's a candidate in a job process, it can feel really frustrating. And I know that, just sort of staying connected to this, and I've got three children as well, that a quick decline always feels really, really difficult and painful for people. I know that. But the reality is that on the other side, organizations are coping with tens of thousands of people applying, for example, for their graduate schemes. So there is a bit of, and I'm sorry, I realize this may not be terribly helpful, that there is, some of it is a numbers game, especially with things like graduate schemes that are, incredibly oversubscribed. I think the other thing to remember is, for example, if you're looking at maybe an HR graduate scheme, but you're also thinking about doing a general business role, or you've done psychology and you're looking at, a psychology role as well, taking the time to make sure that your application, your curriculum vitae, covering letter is tailored and is relevant to the role is really important. If you can make yourself stand out by demonstrating experience you've got that might be relevant as well to the organization. That's really important. And I was helping one of my eldest daughter's friends is sort of starting to think about a career in HR. And we spent an hour together, and I said, look, here are some great books. Check whether or not you're actually interested in HR. Let's have a look at your CV. Why don't we see if we can make some of the stuff that you're doing in your degree more relevant to HR? Because actually it is relevant to HR. It's just you perhaps don't understand about it. And then I said, and when you get into interviews, make sure that you've researched about that organization, that you've got sensible questions, because when you do get through to that, organizations do use technology for the early sifting because of the numbers. But once you get in front of people, if you can remember that they're probably interviewing, 10s, 20s people, and if you ask them how they are and you have a question and you can demonstrate some understanding of what you think the profession or the job is that you're interested in, which you can get from the website. It's very, and if someone was going to have an interview with me, it wouldn't take much looking on LinkedIn to go, oh, okay, and look at this podcast. Okay, she thinks HR is about helping the organization be brilliant through its people. If someone says to me in an interview, so Danny, you tell me that I know what your ethos about HR is. Tell me a bit more about what that means. Being interested and being interesting is going to really help you, right?
So I think that is very useful distillation of 3 or 4 handy hints there. But I'm going to drill down even a little bit more there. So somebody gets through to the interview stage, and I accept they might not meet you, but maybe your interviewer is ill for the day. So you're doing 5 or 6 interviews that day, and they have tailored their CV, they've made their application relevant, they are in front of you, and they're being interested and they're asking the right questions. What are the other things that make you stand out, particularly now in your role in Aviva, and think, actually, this person's got something? What's the something that you're looking for that you think in an HR related role, they really could be someone you want to give a job to?
So definitely the commerciality point is really important, that as well as understanding, and I know it's a lot to ask of people, especially early on in their careers, but if you come for a job at Aviva, say, and you don't have some sort of sense of what insurance is, which I realize is tricky because lots of young people don't need or have any of our products. And frankly, probably their parents don't always speak with great excitement about insurance. Although we do pensions and wealth and, all that sort of stuff. So, but just having a sense of the sector and what it is that you're talking about, and maybe some of the challenges that exist with it. So I always think what's interesting about financial services is that you can't really see and touch our products. So how do we engage with customers? But though, what might be interesting about a particular job type or an organization or a sector, those are the places I would look for great questions to ask somebody. The other thing is when you walk into an interview, I do believe that great interviewers understand that their job is to get the best out of the candidate in front of them, but know yourself as a candidate. So if you tend to be a bit nervous, which almost everybody is, if you chat and go, hi, how are you? Thanks so much for seeing me today. And just start talking and get your breath back, calm yourself, center yourself, all that sort of stuff. And you go, right, well, I can talk and breathe. And that's all I need to do. You will put them at ease. They will put you at ease. And then, give them a chance to, run the process in the way they want to. If you need to be put at ease and someone's not doing that, find a way to do it yourself, and be, back to this, be interested in the people who you are meeting, because they can help you tremendously. And if you can't think of a question, do you know what question would you ask if you were me? You can always ask that, right? There's always something you can say, but scribble some notes down first.
I've taken some notes here, actually. Personal people, definitely. Now, when all of us, as we're progressing our careers, we learn from our successes. They all went back go well. We learn from our fails or our mistakes. Arguably, we learn more from those as long as you don't keep repeating them. In your line of work, if you muck up, it can affect other people's lives quite rapidly. And so I'm interested from your own perspective, Danny, about the stages in your career where maybe something didn't go well and you think, I wish I'd done it differently, but I've learned from it. How has that sort of come through in your work? And what have you learned from those moments?
I make mistakes every day. Genuinely, I make mistakes every day. And actually, I always thought I was pretty good at doing two things with mistakes. The first is like really learning from it and going, okay, that's not going to happen again. And I'm going to share the experience with my team. And the second thing is to not carry it like a regret, because I think they are exhausting. So I'm a great believer in lots of lessons, not lots of regrets, from what I do. I actually think, so my current boss, Amanda Blanc, who's the CEO of Aviva, is better at taking feedback than I think anyone else I've ever worked for. And one of the things I've definitely learned from her is to be even more receptive to feedback. And feedback doesn't, as you go through your career, sometimes people go to you, I've got some feedback for you. And you go, oh, here we go, brace for impact. As you get more senior, people don't do that anymore. They don't say, Amanda might as my boss, but generally people don't say to you, I've got feedback for you. And you have to be really receptive to it. So I did a call with some of my team last week about some changes we were making. At the end, I said, so how are we all feeling? How is everybody about it? No, it's fine. And the end of the call, I phoned one of the other leaders who was on the call with me. And I said, what do you think? He said, well, they all seem fine. I went, no. They were flat. That's not good. You want it to be fine, but actually go look, challenge yourself. Because if you go, oh, I don't think that was great, I think there's some other issues here, and you go ask, and if they all say to you, actually, it's fine, then great. But really do try and learn all the time. Every day is a school day. It really is.
I think the feedback as you're senior is an interesting one, because I can often find if I do try and elicit some feedback, you've often got people in two camps. One are, well, I'm not going to say anything good to my boss because I'm completely sucking up and crawling. This is very, and the other's like, well, I'm not going to say anything bad to my boss because they don't like it, and therefore that will reflect on me. But I think you can always find, I certainly know amongst my senior team, I know the ones I want the really, really honest feedback. I know the ones who are going to give it to me.
What I say to my team is, look, we need to have a relationship where you can give me feedback and where I can give you feedback. If you can just remember, much as I try not to, I've got an ego, I've got feelings. Can you try and give me the feedback in a way that helps me to hear it? That would be great. Thank you. And then I go, here it comes.
Phrase actually in the future of how to do it. Danny, we're almost out of time now, but one thing I just wanted to do, if you could paint a picture of, because I think it's perhaps easier for career stars and listeners to get their head around from what you've been saying about what the early stages of a career in HR look like, what you might be doing and who you might be dealing with. But when you're the chief, when you're the head in a large organization like Aviva with so many employees, what's in your in tray for the week ahead? Because I'm presuming, maybe wrong, you're not doing tons and tons of interviews every single day.
No, I do. I mean, I do still interview people. I think it's really important. And actually, again, working with a boss who has a similar value set to you, Amanda and I always interview very senior people who are joining Aviva together for two reasons. Firstly, because we want to make sure that we've got the right people coming in and they'll fit in, but also almost more importantly, because by the time we see them, bless them, everyone's seen them, almost more importantly is that they know that we are rooting for them as well. That we've all got sort of skin in the game in them being successful. My week tends to, there are bits that come up, individual issues at a senior level or not at a senior level, but, very serious issues around perhaps the welfare of individuals. So I still do that stuff where it's, we've got 23,000 people, but I still deal with that stuff where it's really serious because every single person at Aviva matters and has to matter and, matters to the organization. But the vast majority of my job is about, right, what is the Aviva strategy? And we have 4 strategic priorities, which are about customer growth, efficiency, and sustainability. And I have to work out how to take the resources I've got to move the organization forwards in line with those priorities without pushing too much change into the organization. Because pretty much anything I do, I go, we could do some brilliant training that would help people be much better at advising customers. People have got to have the capacity to absorb that training. Or if I think we need to invest more in our leaders, which is one of our priorities for next year. And there's always a bit of me that goes, God, I've been here 4.5 years. How can I only be doing leadership now? And it's because 2 years ago, we decided that retraining people on technology and data and digital was a key priority. And then in the first year I was here, putting in decent performance management was the priority, and putting in Aviva University as a learning center of expertise. So it's about working out which priority strategically that will have the biggest impact on Aviva is getting to the top and is the one that we need to invest in. And then on top of that, there's a drumbeat of sort of annual processes that you have in pretty much any organization around: when are we reviewing performance of individuals? How often do we do it? When do we look at talent? When do we look at succession plans? When do we look at people's reward and compensation? So there's this sort of annual drumbeat. There is the longer term strategic plan. And then there's the ad hoc daily, oh, we need to sort something. It's a brilliant job. Absolutely brilliant job. I genuinely love it.
I think that in wrapping this up, Danny, what you said right at the beginning about the role is principally how to make the business brilliant through its people. I haven't heard those exact words for, but I think having worked with a lot of people in HR functions for, that is a really not just nice, but accurate descriptor of what you're trying to do here. And when you were talking about what people who may be thinking this as a career route should be thinking about, it's not just that I like people, I'm going to go into HR. I mean, perhaps if you don't like people, certainly rule it out.
Yes, don't.
But it's more than that. And I was struck by the comments about the commerciality needs, and you've got to understand business. You need an interest in business. You need increasingly to be able to use and understand data. And if you're going for an application or a role in this particular area, really tailoring your application, making it relevant, and then showing that interest, asking those questions, doing the due diligence, if you will, on the person and the role. I think that in the short conversation has painted a really useful, insightful, colorful picture of working in HR and people and culture in that area. And clearly, if you go in there and you do it well, you can make a huge difference to both your business and people's lives. So, Danny, thank you so much for joining us there. It's been really interesting.
I've really enjoyed it. Thanks so much, Mark.
This podcast is sponsored by We Are Futures. To find out more about We Are Futures and how we can introduce your brand, business or organisation to the mass markets of tomorrow, visit www.wearefutures.com. Make sure to search for Careers Unwrapped in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Remember to click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at We Are Futures, thanks for listening.